Yeah.
Okay, hey, what's up, America? Welcome to Goodnight America. I'm America's sweetheart, Eric Ryan. Let me tell you what we do on the show. Not that I need to, because this is the biggest thing on the internet. But what we do is we interview the greatest authors of all time who happen to still be alive. And today, whoa, it's going to be a good one. Before I talk about the book, let me tell you about Derric. Is it Gilliard?
Gilliard, yes, sir.
Gilliard. All right. I've heard it pronounced different ways on different podcasts, so I just wanted to be sure. But you, sir, you were retired in 2022, but that was after 25 years as a federal employee working with political appointees in the Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden administrations. You're a career communications professional adept at strategic planning in the execution of communication strategies that promote organizational messaging and branding. And I say that because your key policy issues within your portfolio include the Affordable Care Act, maternal health, HIV and AIDS, Medicare expansion, healthcare access, COVID, diversity, and the CARES Act. Now, pretty good resume. And then what you did is you wrote a book. You wrote a book called The Longest 4 Years of My Life, A View from the Field by a Black Fed in the Trump administration. It chronicles the highs and the lows of one of the most controversial and disruptive presidencies of the modern era from the viewpoint of a Black career professional who worked in the real world with 8 southeastern states not in the Washington Beltway. Woo! All right, I got through it. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate it. Now, the first thing I want to point out is, all right, so when you title your book, The Longest 4 Years of My Life, A View from the Field by a Black Fed in the Trump administration, it suggests that a Black Fed would have a different experience than a white Fed. And I believe you to be 100% correct. Now, I live in Massachusetts. It's very blue, but there are still some Trump supporters. I live about an hour outside of Boston. You still see the stupid Trump flags, although I will say anecdotally, no one's flying them anymore. I don't know if that means anything. But so I think if you talk to people who fancy themselves reasonable Republicans, they'll push back on the idea that Trump is outwardly racist. So I just did a little bit of let's go high level. First term, you had the Muslim ban in 2017, it was an executive order where he banned Muslims coming to this country from several countries. You had the family separation at the border of 2018, which was a zero tolerance immigration policy that separated thousands of migrant children from the parents. You had attempts to end DACA. You had the housing discrimination lawsuit in the 70s, where the Department of Justice sued Trump Management Corporation for racial discrimination, i.e., he refused to rent to Black tenants. He settled and had to change his policies. He called Mexican immigrants rapists in 2015 in the campaign. After the Charlottesville
thieves.
Yep.
Rapists and thieves, yeah.
In Charlottesville, after a white supremacist rally, he said there were very fine people on both sides. He's attacked prominent Black public figures like Colin Kaepernick, Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who he said was a low IQ individual. He called Congressman Elijah Cummings disgusting, rat and rodent-infested mess. He called African nations, Haiti and El Salvador, shithole countries. He was one of the most outspoken birthers. I wonder why he wanted to see Obama's birth certificate and not Jimmy Carter's or Bill Clinton's. It's weird, isn't it? Why? What is it about Obama? And then he's also endorsed Confederate statues, calling them beautiful symbols of heritage. So I'll say this. He hasn't been caught on hot mic using the N-word, but I think there's enough anecdotal evidence to suggest that him and his supporters feel that the ideal American is a white American. Now, I hate this big, fat, orange moron from a distance, but you got to hate him up close, which is exciting to me. All of that said, with the book, was your experience under Trump different than your experience under the Clinton, Bush, and Biden administrations?
It was absolutely unique. And very early on, I could tell that was what it was going to be. So I started to chronicle everything that I could. And there's a lot more than what I put out there. But yes, it was an unbelievable show, so to speak, right?
Where did it start? So he gets into office, and then is it immediate? Like what? So this administration, he seems to be writing 10 executive orders a day and really getting aggressive. Was it that same feel, or was it a slow burn?
No, because I don't think he knew what he was doing the first time. And actually, I think he got a lot of advice about who to put around him. And there were a lot more traditional Republicans. And of course, and that's why most of them ended up exiting stage right before, certainly within the first 2 years, because they found out that they were working for a madman, and who was, to me, this is the first president, Eric, that I ever worked for that I felt like did not love this country. I disagreed with some of them. I disagreed with President Obama sometimes, but I'm saying I think all of them thought they were doing the best thing for this country. I think he's loading his pockets up, him and his billionaire buddies. And I think that's it. And they don't care about the next generation. They don't care about America's image abroad. They don't care about betraying our partners. And they just don't care about, I think he cares about, quite honestly, he cares about white men. Mm-hmm. And he cares about wealthy people.
Yes. I mean, and I think that's so obvious. And I think, there's, we could talk for 10 hours on this. Like at this point, I don't know if you know this statistic, but it's something I believe like 95% of the politicians that spend the most money during a campaign win the election. That's not democracy. That's an oligarchy. So I think his being openly embracive of this whole thing isn't, like he is the problem, but it's also like the problem has been systemic. As soon as lobbying entered the door, you should have thrown the baby out with the bathwater and started over. He's just leaning so far into it, and he's got half the country supports it, which is so weird because ultra wealthy white men represent such a small infinitesimal part of the population, and they don't benefit the rest of us. So why half of us are absolutely in love with these people blows my mind.
I mean, I think because that's who they want to be and will never be, but we live in a sick society for sure. One other thing about Trump that put out is remember with the Central Park 5, and even after DNA proved that they did not do it, he still said he thought that they should have been executed to this day.
Yeah.
My first boss was an ardent Republican. She was one of the first people in Congress to support Donald Trump. She was a Congresswoman, Renee Elmers, out of North Carolina. She was a fierce anti-Obamacare advocate, very good on the stump. But one of the things I noticed very quickly was even though she was his appointee. So in every other administration, Eric, at least, so there are 10 regional offices. Well, there were until about 2 weeks ago, and now there are only 4. And you may have heard that. But so there were 10 regional offices. In every other administration I worked in, at least 6 of the regional directors were women. In the Trump administration, she was the only woman, and she would always complain about how the Good Old Boy Network kept shutting her down. Like one of the things that she kept saying early on, because this was just before the emergence of COVID, and she kept telling them that we need to be, but we knew that it was coming. Okay, she kept telling her colleagues and the Office of Intergovernmental and External Affairs that we work for, underneath the secretary, that they needed to be focused on telehealth, because she's saying, and particularly like we have a lot of rural areas in Mississippi and Kentucky and Tennessee and Alabama, and they just kept shutting her down. And then of course, when COVID hit and all these fragile elderly people with high comorbidities couldn't go in and see doctors for their checkups, for all the things that they would normally get. And it really led to hundreds of thousands of more deaths because they were so bullheaded and wouldn't listen to her. They wouldn't let her talk. And in a minute, she just said, well, hey, to hell with this, I'm out of here. And so that was one thing that was really different. They were a lot of male toxicity in that whole deal. And so, that was one of the things. And of course, never was there. Now, I never had tweeted before. At that point in time, I was a 63-year-old man. And, that just wasn't what I did. But of course, I had to learn to tweet. We had the 8 Southeastern states, which is the largest region. And so every morning it got to the point, Eric, and I'm a late night person, not an early morning person, preferably, but I'm reaching over half asleep about 4:30 in the morning, groping for my cell phone. 'Cause excuse me. I'm looking to see what he has tweeted that night that I'm going to have to react to in the morning. Yeah. And, you know, so for us, we had the only of the 10 officers, we had the only all black staff. The staff is like 4 people. And so to deal with his policies and his racist attitudes, like making the justice marches be about patriotism and the flag instead of, frankly, over policing of unarmed black men. And, you know, as you said, you went down the list of the things that he said. He attacked Congressman John Lewis down here in Atlanta. He took, well, of course, and wouldn't go to his funeral because he's a vindictive, like a petulant little 6-year-old child.
Attacking John Lewis is criminal. That is like, how fucking dare you? I mean, he attacked John McCain too. He has there's no scruples, there's no principles. He doesn't give a shit. And his supporters line right up to kiss his ass, which is embarrassing. They should be embarrassed as Americans as men, because none of them, not Trump or any of his supporters, have ever done what John Lewis has done or what McCain has done. And I just don't know why this guy, this fat, this morbidly obese, makeup wearing, diaper wearing, dumpy fuck is their hero. I just don't, how is this the guy? Oh, because he tells it like it is. No, he doesn't. He lies constantly.
He's a lightweight John Wayne. You know, I say in my book, you know, America, white America in particular, you know, and I don't lump people together because I'll tell you, my pastor is a white guy that I know would do anything for me and me for him. But I'm saying,
and not all of us are bad, but, you know, a lot of us are.
Yeah, there's an element, though. There's at least a 35% group that just they love that. And I think that, yeah, so he comes off as this John Wayne kind of character, but we know in a lot of ways he's just a big punk because, you know, he's a draft dodger. And then he went all over to Europe for D-Day and wouldn't get out of the car because it was raining. And the fact that veterans have supported him like he did. And we see what he just did to the VA. And I mean, he's just not a good person.
And if you buy into his tough guy image, you have to be a little bit of an idiot. You just have to, because look at you. That's a tough guy, a draft dodging Nepo baby who puts on pancake makeup every time he's in front of the goddamn camera. I mean, this is the guy. This is the guy. I'm shocked. There's a lot here. My problem though is I'm pretty far left, but we don't have that version. You know, we don't have that thing. And those that we do are unelectable by the general American base. Like, I love AOC, but we're not ready for a brown woman to be president. Right. I love Bernie Sanders, but he's 150 years old. And in the word socialism is a non-starter for half the country. Cory Booker, I just can't understand why he just can't do it for some reason. I love the filibustering. And then Pete Buttigieg, genius, razor sharp, will beat you in any argument, but he's gay and we're not ready for that. So where's my people? Where's the middle-aged white guy like Bill Clinton, but a little more vitriol so we can fight the right? Like, how do we have this many politicians and we don't have anybody who does what you could dress down the Republicans so well? I have a list of people who kissed Trump's ass after he went. Ted Cruz, he called Ted Cruz's wife ugly.
Yes, that's right.
Little Marco Rubio.
That's right.
He called Lindsey Graham an idiot. And all these people line up to kiss his ass and lick his boots. Like, all they are is sycophantic lunatics. If we had anybody who could dress them down, you destroy, because they're little bitches. They're the whole party acts like tough guys, but they're little bitches. There's just they're so easy to attack, and we don't do it. We're obsessed with decorum. We're obsessed with not insulting anybody. We're obsessed with not offending anybody to our detriment. And talk about voting against our best interests. We run against our best interests. We could win. We choose to lose. And I almost think, I don't believe in a global cabal or anything, but you know how the whole Harlem Globetrotters always beat the Washington Generals? Okay, but they're both getting a paycheck from the same thing. It's almost as if we're jobbers in wrestling. We just go out and lose. We go out and lose. And it's almost spectacle, and it almost seems purposeful. And I don't want to come across as a conspiracy theorist, but at some point you go, Jesus, when are we going to fight?
Yeah, it's you know, the Republicans, you don't even know who the Republicans are anymore, because think about it, when It was the Republicans who chased Nixon out of office. It wasn't the Democrats. The Republicans said, we're not having this. But these people, they are so afraid. And you're right. They're a bunch of gutless wonders. And they just kiss the ring. And as long as it gets them power or keeps them their seat. And that's a scary thing. And the ones who will fight it, who disagree, at a certain point, they just throw in the towel and say, hey, life's too short. I'm just not going to stay here and deal with it.
It's pathetic, though. And this is what's so frustrating about their side is that you're right. It's hard to pin down because Republicans used to be certain things. They're like, I think we've all met somebody who starts dating somebody and then they become that person. All their opinions become their opinions. And that's what the Republicans are, because before their fat orange boyfriend came along, they were the party of law and order, right? They were the law and order party, but they loved January 6th. Couldn't get enough of January 6th. They Blue Lives Matter until fat orange boyfriend tells us they don't. They were the party of the Constitution. 6 months ago, every Republican would have told you they're constitutionalists. Now they're fascists, because as soon as their fat orange boyfriend says that, due process doesn't matter anymore, they're like, yeah, that's stupid. Due process is stupid. The Constitution is stupid. They used to be the party of family values until their fat orange boyfriend started, 3 wives, 800 children, paying for sex, porn stars, grabbing women without consent. And then they're like, no, I never liked family values. They used to be the party of military respect until he goes after McCain and he attacks the Khan family who lost a kid. He called veterans suckers and losers. Yeah. They used to be the party of fiscal responsibility until their fat orange boyfriend added, what was it, 7.8 trillion to the deficit. They used to be the party of national security until he started hoarding classified documents in his bathroom and war plans were going on Signal. So there's no scruples. They don't give a shit. There's no decorum. They don't stand for anything. Their fat orange boyfriend tells them something and they get right down on their knees. And it's so frustrating. Plus it's destroying democracy in the country and, our economy, but also it's just annoying, isn't it?
Absolutely. And if January 6th would have been Black Lives Matter or any people of color, how many would have been slaughtered, Derric, right? I mean, there would have been a clear message sent.
All they do is get upset when there's looting and somebody sets a target on fire. They lose their goddamn minds. Oh, Black Lives Matter, Antifa. But when you attack police officers at the Capitol, that's fine. Or they tell you that it was okay. Right. But then they said, listen, they were plants. It was Antifa. It was Black Lives Matter. They're the ones who did it. But then, fat orange moron gets in and he then pardons them. So what was it? What was it? Are you pardoning Antifa members? Are you pardoning white Black Lives Matters guys? No, it's just lie after lie after lie. And they need to believe it because they've built them up as a god. So they need to believe their God and whatever he says is fine and it goes. To me. All right. So let me ask you about
it. Right. You're absolutely right. I don't recognize this country anymore.
That's a perfect segue into the next question. So you said your age in another podcast. It was 70. Are you 70? Is that what it is?
Yes, I am.
So you've seen some shit. Like you've lived through some tumultuous times.
I have.
It's not as if it's been smooth sailing for these past 70 years for a black man in the United States. Where are we now as compared to what you've seen growing up and where we were? Has it ever been better or okay-ish, or has it always been a nightmare and now it's just in the news more?
I think there was some real progress made. It's certainly never been an equal society, but we were making progress. And I think that there's this big portion of America that says it's almost like what happened after the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65. And then what they kind of told Dr. King was, okay, that's enough. We've done this, we've done that. That's why he wrote his famous book, Why We Can't Wait. And I don't know if you could tell this from my bio, Eric, but before I went to work for the federal government, I was a communications director for the organization he co-founded and led until his assassination in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So that's why justice is at the forefront of what I do. And so I think that, what the damage he's already done is probably set us back a decade, maybe a generation. Because, look, how do you take Harriet Tubman's things out of the VA archives and, you go and loot the Smithsonian, the National African American Historical History Museum, and you can't talk about Jackie Robinson. I mean, come on now.
And why would you do this unless it's just overt racism? There's no,
that's all it
is. There's no other reasonable explanation, just other than you're a giant racist piece of shit. That's it.
He has a hard on to destroy blackness in this country and every piece of black history, and he wants to put in revisionist history. Whatever woke is to some people, I want to be woke. I don't want to be asleep. And a lot of these people do want to be asleep. They want to pretend that the terrible things that this country has done to people of color, from Native Americans to African Americans and other people, didn't happen. And that it's all about American exceptionalism. And there is a such thing as American exceptionalism, but the enslaved people built this country. Yeah. And, that's just the reality of it. And if we don't ever, when you go to Germany, and you know this yourself, Eric, there are no statues to Hitler. There's not, you can't find one of those anywhere.
And yet people still remember, because the whole argument is that we need the statues so people don't forget the Civil War. Well, no, we don't. We'll never forget. Don't worry. And yes, to your point, there's no Hitler statues because no one's going to forget. Oh, Hitler, forgot about that guy. Maybe we shouldn't exterminate Jews. Oh, shit. If the statue hadn't been there, I would have done it. It's such a stupid argument. Let me ask you about this. So I have a lot of questions. Critical race theory seems to be a thing that was, remember, everybody was upset about critical race theory a few years ago. That was one of the things that everybody, oh shit, critical race theory is going to make little white kids feel badly about what happened to black guys. Okay, blacks in general. Here's my view on critical race theory. I did 23andMe, and I'm about 83% Irish, so I'm just setting this up to say, there was no Ryan tobacco farms. Even if there was, I wouldn't, the whole thing is you don't want to make people feel bad and guilty for stuff that happened 300 years ago. I don't necessarily feel guilty, but I don't think we should not learn about it. It happened. What into erase history is to erase facts, So I have no problem with my son knowing what happened. I mean, hey, listen, I don't think he should internalize guilt. We weren't here. We didn't do it. But not knowing isn't going to help anybody.
Absolutely. And in fact, knowing does help, because one of the things I did, particularly around my first book, which is kind of a kumbaya book, because it talked about these people who sacrificed and knew that what they were doing wasn't really going to benefit them, but it was for future generations, and, being spat upon and beaten and jailed and marginalized and told they could only work in jobs with their hands, as opposed to you may have had the brilliance to be a surgeon or an attorney or anything else. And so I think that what it helps, Eric, is that it will provide a certain amount of understanding and maybe sensitivity with some of these people who haven't really had reaction with Black people, for example. And say there's somebody that comes to your company and maybe that you could tell they haven't had all of the background and all of the training that somebody else. I give you an example. I know somebody who went up to St. John's and went in, and a smart girl went in and to the laboratory and saw kind of things that she'd never seen before. Now, ended up doing really well, got a PhD, and a master's degree. But I'm saying that your school may not have had what a lot of other schools had. There's schools I go to church in one of the most at-risk parts of Atlanta. It was ravaged during the 70s and 80s because of heroin, and those kids can't even take their books home and most of them, a lot of them don't have a computer at home. So what I'm saying, if you understand that you had advantages others do, but you see somebody that's hardworking and bright, that can be somebody special with an opportunity, I think it's helpful when you know that, American wealth was in home ownership. Like the FHA, right after World War I, black GIs couldn't get home loans, whereas they were giving them to white GIs coming back from the war, and also giving them the GI Bill that let them go to college for free. And that's when colleges started to explode. So that's when generational wealth began to be created. And so if you don't understand that, then you can be a little more critical about why some people still struggle. And it didn't help when, our government, even though maybe well intended under Johnson, basically made sure that there wasn't a man in the house in a lot of black inner city communities, because there was a penalty for that. So
to suggest that systemic racism doesn't exist means that you haven't read a single thing about systemic racism, or that you don't want to because you have to explain away your lack of success, or like, well, there's no white privilege, because no, there fucking is objectively. So shut the fuck up. Just then if you say it doesn't exist, you're just ignoring facts. There's plenty of the GI Bill is a perfect example. I didn't know that black soldiers couldn't get it. I do know, though, that it created the middle class for a bunch of working class white people who under normal circumstance didn't have access to higher education, because at the time it was only accessible for the wealthy. So if you don't have a shot at that, then you're missing generations of men who weren't getting degrees, who weren't buying houses, who weren't passing that down, and you're
always starting behind in that regard. I tell you what, my old boss, who gave the benediction after Obama's first inauguration, he talked about people who live in the 51st state of denial, and that's what a lot of those people you're talking about do, Eric. Because it's real as the nose on your face, but you choose not to acknowledge it. He also said this. He said when Black America, when white America gets a cold, Black America gets pneumonia, and that's so. I think a lot of where we are, a lot of the problems, although it's been really quiet since this election, but during the first Trump term, and even following all the way back to Obama's, there are a lot of angry young white men in this country, and of course that's being stoked by Trump. Now of course he's just trying to CYA, because he's destroying us economically with these tariffs and some of these, and then these massive cuts to government that are gonna, all of our research, Alzheimer's, cancer, any kind of thing, that it's going to be set back 20 years because you wiped out the CDC, you wiped out the NIH that does all these studies. And so do you care? No, you don't care, because you're looking for, you're looking for a way to give your buddies an even deeper tax cut.
Which I understand. Well, I don't, because they already have more money than they know what to do with. So why they want more is, well, it's like giving a heroin addict more heroin, thinking it's going to cure their heroin addiction. But the other thing is, like, for me and you, for even the average Trump supporter, have you gotten your no more CDC check or your no more NIH check? No. All we do is we lose the services, we pay the same amount of taxes, and we're not getting anything in the mail. So why would anybody support this? Talk about voting against your best interests. This is reaching critical mass where you can't get any dumber. All right, so if they wipe out Social Security, you think you're getting a fucking check back? No, you're just going to starve to death. It is our love of the oligarchy is absolutely fucking maddening. And I just, here's another thing, just based on your work with the Affordable Health Care Act and everything else. I don't think people realize in general how right, with a capital R, the United States is. No other country in the world, okay, every country has, half their citizens are conservative in ideology, half their citizens are progressive in ideology. That's just how it is. But I'm telling you right now, there's some neo-Nazi meeting going on in Germany, and not one of those neo-Nazis is saying, you know what I want? An American healthcare system where if I have a heart attack, I can lose my house. Even the most ardent Nazis go, you know what's great? Single-payer healthcare. So nobody you know what I mean? But we are so right. You have people fighting Obamacare just so people could get insured. That is fucking insane. In this, we talk about like setting us back 20 years with the CDC and the NIH. We are 200 years behind the rest of the world when it comes to single-payer healthcare and affordable higher education. And why? Because a sick, stupid population is much easier to control. And we keep voting for this system. I don't get it.
And the other part of that, and then you're absolutely right, Eric, is that when people who don't have health care, don't have insurance, oftentimes they'll wait till they're like almost dead, and then they'll go in, and critical care costs 4 and 5 times the amount of preventive care. Let's get people a checkup every year. Let's catch it on the front end. And that's what the Affordable Care Act was. That's one of the 10 essential health benefits. And of course, people complain, well, I'm a man, I'm not going to have a baby. But if somebody has one out, and even the people that have them out of wedlock, you're still ending up paying for them. It costs more to pay for people on the dole than to give people, help people have afford health insurance so that they can be out there working and taking care of their business and not be on public support.
The problem is we're such, like, I think it might be a human thing. We like to solve downstream issues as opposed to upstream issues. So, it costs $110 a day to incarcerate somebody. We have more people incarcerated in this country than other country. Oh, what about if we, help with the recidivism rate by, not making sure that these people have to say they're a felon on an application and then never have the opportunity to get a job again. So then they start selling drugs because that's the only thing they can do. And look who ends up back in jail, and it's cyclical. So why don't we solve something like this? Why don't we make sure that people can get access to healthcare before, so we don't all pay for it once it's 5 times worse? It's just, it doesn't make any sense. And you said in one of your other appearances something to the effect of that white women have sort of college-educated white women have sort of lost. They're going to the other side. Young men are sort of radicalized, and that bears out in statistics. So I'm not challenging. As a matter of fact, it's sort of heartbreaking. If you look at the Latino vote, the college-educated white women vote, the Gen Z male vote, like, fuck faces. Yeah, you're voting for the wrong thing here. You're going to lose. They don't care about you. Why do you care about them?
And right now, I was looking at some statistics last night. They're moving in the right way because, of course, everybody's getting hurt here. Everybody. Right. And if it's not you, you have parents or aunts and uncles or people you care about whose Social Security is at threat, and people who didn't think it was important to vote. People who are on Medicaid, who are gonna struggle. I mean, hell, you can't even go to the national parks and know that the restrooms are gonna be clean because those people. I was just out west, and some of them, and they're saying, "Hey, we don't even have people here to clean the restrooms now because of why, right?" So it's just crazy. And hey, food prices are supposed to be going down, right? Gas prices are supposed to be going down. And now the big boys are telling him, hey, by this summer, we're going to have empty shelves if you don't fix this.
The Stockholm syndrome runs so deep. So this is one of the things, too, that bothers me is I thought the watershed moment for women in particular would be Roe v. Wade. I thought finally not showing up to vote and being apathetic cost you the right to have an abortion. But didn't fucking matter. So this paragraph here from a news article I read is so okay. It said in last year's presidential election, white voters made up an estimated 71% of the national electorate. That's a number that for decades has trended downwards as the country's population has diversified. This is where it gets bad. But it's still more than 6 times larger the share of Black and Hispanic voters and 25 times higher than Asian voters. I don't want to victim blame here. I don't want to take any credit for white people voting, although I did vote. But man, we need to get Black and Hispanic and Asian voters to the voting booth, or angry white men are going to win every single fucking time. And that's what's happening here. Guys, you got to get off your asses. You just do, and I get it. I hate the system too. I think it should be destroyed. Lobbying has ruined the entire thing. But 6 times higher and 25 times higher, you're allowing angry white men to vote against their best interest. And fuck you. Stop doing that. I get it. Gerrymandering, Tuesday, it's tough. But man, come on. Got to go.
No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And in Georgia, I will say, is one of the few states where we have very much a growing Asian and Latino population. And the Latino population did go with Kamala here in Georgia. Now, Asian population, that's another story. But, I think, and this is something interesting, 2 things. One is No, immigrants don't come here to this country to be like Black Americans. They come here to be like the model white American. And so,
That
so many of them then tend to vote
I know.
with them, even though they're voting against their own best interests. And now they're seeing this because we're hearing stories of in apartments where they're cutting holes in so that in the walls so that they have a place that their children can hide if the deportation people come in here. And if you get rid of all the Latinos, all the people from Central America, who's going to cut your grass? Who's going to build your decks? These are people who are willing to, because they're going to come and work hard. Who's going to harvest all your fruits and vegetables? Because a lot of economies are going to simply collapse.
It's white guys. They're lining up to go pick oranges. I can't tell you how many college educated white men I see going, oh God, if I could just get one of those great citrus picking jobs, my life would be complete. Like this, it's the mental gymnastics people have to do. Here's the thing too, like, okay, so I live in Massachusetts, again, a lily white state, but everybody here kind of goes north to vacation. A lot of people go to Maine, and a lot of workers who come and work the restaurants in Maine for the summer are Canadian students. Guess who's not showing up? Guess who's not renting the hotels because they don't want to cross the border? Fucking Canadians. So it hammers from China, from Mexico, from Canada, all around. None of this makes sense. None of this is making America great again. None of this benefits anybody but the ultra rich. It's so weird.
Europe bookings from Europe are down 40%, Eric, because they're saying, "Oh no, we're not going to come and spend our money with you." Like you said, in Canada, they're pouring out our whiskey. Because they said, hell no, we don't want it on our shelves because our friends are now our enemies and our enemies are now our friends. And I think there's a certain fear in white America. And again, I'm not talking about woke white America, but this a third to 40% that because in roughly 2042-ish, we are to become a minority majority country. And so for the first time, white America is going to be in a position of needing to share a little bit of the quote unquote power and influence. And that scares a lot of people to death.
That is, yeah.
I think some people say, well, wow, if we have to share, maybe they'll treat us like we treated them.
Oh, that's the fear. Yes, of course, that's the fear. That's why I don't want it. I'm not racist. I just don't want to be treated how we fucking historically treated other people.
Know, but people aren't like that. You know, people just aren't. Now, certainly some are, but I mean, come on now. But we're better than that. Dr. King always talked about man's inhumanity to man. And that's what a lot of what we see. And as you mentioned, all these women who flock to Trump. And he's a predator. He's an abuser of women, clearly, right? And yet it's like he's your daddy, right? And so, you know, he says, I'll take care of you. Women, I'll take care of you. Women love me.
So this is the interesting thing about you as well, is that I think there's a pull towards a clean hierarchy for some people. Now, you're an evangelical Christian, right? So I grew up I'm an Army brat, although I'm the oldest of 5. I moved 9 times in 18 years. I went to military schools the entire time. My father's a retired colonel, but he had 5 agnostic children who were far to the left. So we were always in an environment that didn't really speak to our souls, I'd say. Although 2, my sister served, and one of my brothers is serving right now.
Wow.
But the idea of an evangelical tends to be right. Like, you know what I mean? That's kind of your side.
Absolutely.
But they're
the worst. We are the worst of the Trump sycophants. I mean,
okay, I'm glad you said that.
And can justify somehow, you know, well, we don't like him personally, or we don't like his habits or the way he talks to people, but we love his policies. You know, his policies to keep people who, and they won't say this, but his policies keep people who don't look like us over there.
Now, do me a favor. I'm no biblical scholar, although I am a confirmed Catholic, so it's not like I have no basis of religion. Right. But his policies seem very anti-Jesus-y in general. It seems like Jesus was much. If you reverse all his policies, you go, that is exactly what Jesus would do. So how the evangelicals side with this guy? Once again, the mental gymnastics, and again, a lot of people hide behind religion. because they're able to justify their bullshit with a book. Well, this book says it. The book does not. You've co-opted it. This is why we have white, blonde, blue hair, jacked out of his mind, arriving in the United States on a bald eagle with a gun. Jesus. That's who Jesus is now.
Because the book says welcome the stranger, though, Eric. And so, but they don't want to welcome the stranger. And so, I mean, that's one of the things that Jesus really did. He crossed over and spent time like with the Samaritan woman, which was against Jewish culture. It was outlawed. And so I'm not a scholar either, but, I know people who are, and I know, but a lot of evangelicals think that they only need to care about people they know about in their community. They don't have to care about people who are outside of their bubble,
But are there any biblical passages to back up what they do believe as opposed to what they obviously don't? Like, was Jesus ever like, you know what you need to do? Kick everybody out, even if they pay taxes, separate children from their mothers, hate minorities. There's none, right?
None of that is accurate. And that's that white Christian nationalism, Eric, right, that is taken over. And like you said, and Trump is right there with Jesus. You have Jesus on a Trump hat, and so I just.
That's gonna melt your mind though, from like your team, because suppose we are a Christian nation and you guys all get lumped together, and you have some of these people that are just like, it's saying the exact opposite.
I go to a church that they're in evangelicals, but it's all about justice ministries and biblical justice, and God was a God of justice, and what we see here in this administration and in a lot of other places is injustice. And Dr. King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and the Bible says, let justice roll down like a mighty river and righteousness like a mighty stream. Now, I'm not seeing no justice and no righteousness in this administration. And yet people justify it.
And they'll say he's the most Christian of the presidents too. I'm sure, you know what I mean? Because never
and I can show you in writing where he says also that Christians are so gullible, and that's why he uses people. See, that's where he's brilliant. He's not a learned man, but he is so brilliant in recognizing weakness and using it, and then pulling those people in because they're here's this uber successful guy who is bankrupted himself so many times, and so he doesn't pay taxes and doesn't pay his people who work for him. You've heard all these stories, right? Of people, he contracts these people and then they don't get paid. He's a user, and people are, we call them in the church sheeple, people who are just leading sheep to the slaughter. And that's a lot of what he does. And he does it better than anybody has done since at least George Wallace.
Yeah. George Wallace. So he, the sheeple thing has been used to describe the left as well, because, we were in power. But then what the sheeple thing is like, Trump has convinced you he's an outsider. And then all he's doing is very typical insider stuff, but like to your point, on steroids. And people are like, oh, well, no, he's a rebel. No, he's so inside. Let me ask you this, though. I have this theory. I haven't really fleshed it out, but I want to get your take on it because you mentioned the whole woke thing. This fascinates me about the left. So this is a I'm trying to work through this theory. This is what I think. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, you had a counterculture, but it hadn't quite pushed through yet. There was like the rock and roll era, and then there was civil rights and Black Panthers and hippies, and like this was all there, but I don't think it pushed through. It was always a punching up sort of thing, right? You had the government and older people always like, kids these days, blah, blah, blah. Then I think in the 90s, it sort of punched through. And I can't really, I have a hard time being definitive about this because the 90s was like when I had a fully formed frontal cortex. But I remember the 90s. it seemed very multiracial. Like at that time, I remember everybody was watching Martin, everybody was watching In Living Color, everybody watched Family Matters. Again, I lived in a multi-ethnic environment because the military, despite what Hollywood wants you to believe, is very black and brown as long as white. So my black friends owned Nevermind and the Black Album from Metallica, and I owned Doggy Style and The Chronic. We all listened to the same shit. So the left seems to have won the culture war. It was very, you had the Spice Girls representing girl power, and Blade was the first black superhero. I know everybody wants to say it was Black Panther. Blade saved the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was, it just felt like a better, more harmonious time, and it felt like we finally won the culture war. Bill Clinton is the first black president because he plays the saxophone on Arsenio Hall. It seemed like a joyous multi-ethnic time, and I wonder how we lost that. And my only thing could be, and again, I'm not anti-woke, but the woke movement was introduced by the left into the left, and it seemed to cause a lot of left infighting, in the sense that I consider myself like a Dave Chappelle liberal, meaning that he's black and married to an Asian woman. He's clearly not racist, but you're allowed to laugh at stuff and have a good time. What seemed to happen with the left is particularly white people started getting offended on other people's behalf. And, I don't want to pull this like I have black friends thing, but I have black friends. A bunch of black dudes don't get offended at shit. It's a lot of shit talking. And, I've never been like, oh, I got to walk on eggshells here. So it almost feels like we self-immolated. Like we brought in this thing that, oh, we can't say that now. That's offensive. Offensive. That's all. That was our position on the left. Anything goes, have a good time, laugh at stuff, be counterculture. And then it seems like we injected ourselves with this poison that divided us and radicalized the right. Nothing gets them out to the voting booth quicker than trans people in a bathroom or trans athletes or critical race, like all this, you know what I mean? We gave them something to get galvanized and we lost ourselves. It's so fucking strange, Instead of punching out, we started punching each other. And Al Franken's a perfect example. Al Franken got caught up in this Me Too movement because he took a stupid picture. Al Franken could have been fucking president. We eat our own. And while we're eating our own, they're kicking our ass. So I don't know. It's something I'm working on, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense. It does make a lot of sense. We are not nearly as ruthless as they are, and that's part of it. I mean, their goal is that fewer people vote. Like they said, they win when fewer people vote. They win when all these people that are incarcerated. They're making a bunch of money in these prisons,
privatized prisons,
and they're putting these people to work, for them. And so, yeah, they're a lot shrewder than the Democrats are. They absolutely are. And the funny thing was, before 1960, and you may know this, Eric, most black people voted Republican because Lincoln was a Republican, and Lincoln wasn't perfect because Lincoln said this, and I learned this in my African American history study, but he said, if I could free all of the slaves and save the Union, I'd do so. If I could free half the slaves and save the Union, I'd do so. If I had to not free any of the slaves and save the Union, I'd do so. So, he wasn't this grand people, but at least they did do it, and then all the Democrats in the South became Dixiecrats, and they were maintaining Jim Crow and maintain.
Oh yeah, they always try to nail you down. This is the thing with the right. I don't mean to interrupt, but they try to nail you down by going, "Well, we're the party of Lincoln." I go, "Yeah. What side was Lincoln on? Anti-slave?" They go, "Yeah." I go, "All right, well, let's tear down all the Confederate statues." And they go, "Well, no, not that. I'm not." You know what I mean? So shut the fuck up. Things change. People are called different things all the goddamn time. Yeah, I hate that argument. It's so stupid. Here's the other thing too. You really can't look too deeply into the founding fathers thing because my parents live on Mount Vernon property. So if you go to Mount Vernon, the estate, there's a slave museum, which I'm sure is going to be torn down any day now. But you can read George Washington's journal. And there's one journal entry where he says something to the effect of, and listen, I'm not going to do this verbatim, but essentially, holy shit, it's so goddamn cold outside. I can't believe it, but I got to go make sure the slaves are doing their job. So I got to get on the horse. So don't give the guys the day off. Just bitch that you have to go, make sure they're doing their shit. And then he freed the slaves on his deathbed because he knew it was wrong, except for Martha's slaves who, he's like, all right, well, I didn't need to let the rest of them go or I can't get into heaven. So it's a whole bunch of bullshit. Listen, I mean, not that different times, I guess, but anyway, it's things. they're never simple, I guess is my larger point here, you know?
No, no, they're not. No, they're not. And Thomas Jefferson, we know he sired lots of children with slave women. So, you know,
Yes,
it's
yes.
Strom Thurmond did the same thing. So there's this hypocrisy for sure.
It's a wild hypocrisy. Well, that's the other thing too, is if you when we sent the Declaration of Independence over to England, have you ever read their responses to it? So they're all men are created equal. Their response to us is like, we outlawed slavery 100 years ago. All men are created equal. You realize how many fucking slavery? So if you like, they're indignant about all men are created equal. Are they? Aren't they? So, people knew the hypocrisy 200, almost 300 years ago. So.
You're absolutely right. And, I'll tell you an interesting story. So, Trump and his minions, Secretary Tom Price, his first secretary, who, of course, got booted because he was flying on private planes and everything. And he's out of Georgia, congressman out of Georgia. And so, they kept saying everything bad about the Affordable Care Act, worst thing since sliced bread, tried over 70 times to replace and repeal. And then finally, they had this meeting where they brought us all together, all 10 regions, and they announced that for the first time since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, we weren't going to be out in the field supporting the navigators, the federally qualified health centers, people like them as Mississippi. They weren't getting any money like the Children's Defense Fund, the NAACP, My Brother's Keeper, but they knew how important it was for their people to have access to health care. So every year I went and do a 6-city top to bottom tour in Mississippi. And what we do is they arrange it and then wait, but they want to hear from the feds. We talk about what's changed in the law, who do you contact to get help, who's eligible, all these kind of things. And then, so I went into my boss, Renee Elmers, again, the first person in Congress, in the House of Representatives, to endorse Trump. She goes, well, yeah. I said, well, we got to tell them we're not coming, because they were looking for us like 3 weeks later, just before the start of open enrollment. So I go home, carefully write this letter, show it to her the next day. Then I send it off, and they call me from Mississippi. They said, what do you mean you're not coming, Derric? Because by now I'm being real careful about what I say, right? Because I know everything's suspect. And I said, well, they told us yesterday that, we're just not going to be out in the regions anymore. And so, I'm being careful. So, but 2 days later, I think we get this newsletter that says HHS abandons Mississippians. So I say, oh, excrement. And I go in and take it to her. I know we got to call DC because I don't want them hearing it from anywhere else. So they call us right back immediately, and they're dressing us down. And they asked me, this Black woman who is head of HR for our department, and I don't think she wanted to ask me this, but she had to because of her. She says, well, why did you feel the need to send that email, Derric? And I'm sitting there saying to myself, and then I said, and I thought, for a minute, I'm stalling and I'm steaming. And I said, well, would you have preferred that we just didn't show up? And then so they tell me, okay, tomorrow we're going to send you from ASPA, which is our public affairs people in DC, an apology, a letter of apology you're going to send to the people of Mississippi. And of course, I'm saying to myself, what the hell am I apologizing for? But, I don't say it. I just... And so guess what, Eric, to this day, do you think I ever got that letter? Because they wanted to throw the rock and hide the hand. Now, my boss, tell you what she said. She stormed out of the office that day. She says, look, if I don't see you all again, it's been great working with you. Because she just was tired of it, even though she had disdain for the ACA. But she said, well, hell, we had 6 years to replace and repeal. We haven't done it, so we should be out there supporting the people. But DC didn't think like that. And so 2 days later, a few days later, actually, the head guy in Mississippi, MHAP, Mississippi Health Advocacy Program, which basically worked for all the marginalized people, because, Mississippi is one of the poorest states in the country, one of the blackest with the deepest vestiges of Jim Crow racism. He's on Ari Melber's show on MSNBC, My emails is up on the screen. You know what I'm saying? Oh shit! And then and what he and then Ari Melber saying we have breaking news here about how about HHS is sabotaging the Affordable Care Act. So I mean, oh hell! So so then we couldn't do any of the things we were doing before. I would have a meeting every week with our various coalitions. I mean, each one, like in South Carolina, there would be one with the upstate and one with the people like down in Charleston and Columbia. In Alabama, we'd have one, but all 8 of our states, and they could ask questions. I'd have our experts on who would fix whatever the glitch was, or they take it back and find solutions. We couldn't even do that. We couldn't even. In fact, I had a colleague who just retired, Eric, and this is what she said. And she worked for CMS, which funded the navigators, and they'd send her material to share with the people every week. And she said, I'm not sending nothing out. I got 2 kids at home who like to eat. Now, I would send it out because I said, look, at a certain point, if they're going to fire me for upholding the law, now I'm not going to hold the calls anymore. And clearly I can't go out and help people, support people like they needed. And, they slashed the budget by 4/5. All the advertising, of course, took us off the road. And yet it's like when people threatened Medicare, it grew because it's hard to take away an entitlement for people. They said, no, you're not taking this from us. So there was this, we pulled off this miracle for this white woman who did what I did at headquarters. But, no more credentials, but of course she had the look and all that good stuff. And somebody heard her in the lunchroom saying, I can't stand that, Derric. I hear he's still down there promoting the Obama agenda. All I was doing was following the law. So my life was hell from that because we were under the microscope from then on, as you can
promoting
imagine.
The Obama agenda of making sure that people have health care.
Because I'm sending out releases that come from their office, but they didn't want us to send them out. They didn't want us to help anybody because they wanted it to die. And I was so thankful when John McCain walked up out of his hospital, out of his deathbed, and did this. Right.
So again, Mississippi, correct me if I'm wrong, I would venture to say they voted for Trump 3 times, right? When you say
every single time. Every single time.
So the poorest states and the least educated states tend to, in the states that require the most federal funding, tend to go that direction.
Absolutely.
I think the difficult thing is we're trying to infer logic in a totally illogical situation, and I don't know that it's not gonna work. But let me ask you this, since we're up on the hour. You've been through a lot. You've seen a lot. Is there hope for the future?
Yeah, you have to have hope. You have to have hope. But I mean, what is really discouraging, Eric, is that we're going to leave. My generation at this point is going to leave this country worse than it was. I won't say when we got here, but certainly worse than it was when our children were born. And that's just scary because we're tearing up the environment. What does he tell people? If you come in here and spend, and they're going to spend, commit to $5 billion, no laws will matter. You can do whatever the hell you want to, because that's because they don't care about what the future is. They don't care about our rich history of caring for people but people die coming here because this is supposed to be this great country where freedom is paramount, and that's all going away. So there is hope, but hell, I never thought I'd see a black president. And we knew that he had to be about as perfect as could be, and Trump has created more chaos in the first 90 days than he was sinful. Obama was sinful when he said Trayvon could have been my son, right?
Well, he wore a tan suit, which was unforgivable. Do you remember that?
Unforgivable. And his wife had to be they wanted to characterize his wife as being a man and a monkey and all this other stuff. So, what did Joe Wilson, the congressman out of South Carolina, says it's a politically correct thing to be against the black man in the White House. And
yeah,
so, there is hope, but I think this is in a twisted sort of way. This is good because it's bringing the resistance together, and now it's bringing about angry white people because they're going to be hurt with Medicare and Medicaid being slashed, and Social Security. A lot of these people have nothing but Social Security. I don't think they're going to stand for it. So, but yes, he set us back a long way, and it's going to take a long time to recover, because I'll tell you this. Next year, watch how many diseases are rampant. We saw what happened with measles. COVID will come back with a vengeance. The flu will come back with a vengeance, because you don't have anybody messaging to people about what they need to do and how to protect themselves. And the people won't be there to help them. So we're in for a hell of a ride. But, I have to stay hopeful, because for people who, when I was a kid, my parents couldn't vote, and I'll tell you this, when we were traveling, I think, to my grandfather's funeral, and we stopped in a gas station in Alabama, and, we had to go to this putrid colored restroom. My mother took me and, went and did my business, and come out, flip off the light, turn off the water. My mother lit into me. And it wasn't until many years later, Eric, that I realized that, because she wanted to leave the light on and leave the water running, because that was the only way she could strike back at that point in time at this racist system that dehumanized us. And he wants that kind of system. He wants to wipe out Black achievement. He wants to lock out Black learning. And he doesn't want the truth to be told. But yes, we have to be hopeful always. Because if you don't have hope, what do you have? But we're going to go through a hell of hard times.
We are, but I think a couple of things that he's done right by accident is that he's galvanized the resistance.
I agree.
And the other thing, he showed all the cracks in the system that were always there, but never exploited quite to this degree. When you grow up in the American education system, you're taught checks and balances. You're taught that, no one can have that much power. We need to do away with executive orders. That was stupid. Whoever came up with that idea, awful. I know they didn't anticipate a madman doing this, but also we didn't anticipate that nobody else would have spines. So, and then the other thing it did is it exposed the Republicans for being, just vapid bootlickers. So
the gutless wonders they are, right?
Yeah, anything their fat orange boyfriend says, they can't wait to drop to their knees, which is very manly for the party of masculinity. I got to tell you, not very manly. All right, hey, listen, you've been great. Thank you for coming on. I'm going to sign off the official broadcast, but can you stick around in the green room for a second? Okay,
absolutely.
All right, man. Thank you. Everybody, go out and buy The Longest 4 Years of My Life. Where can they get it?
So they can get it on Amazon, and hopefully when you put this up, maybe you can put my website up, and it's just www.derricgilliard.com.
Beautiful. All right, man.
But
thanks again.
Absolutely. Check it out.
Well, I know I will. All right. Good night, America.